What difference can changing your thoughts have on the way you perform? And can you change your thoughts when you are actually in front of the audience? Hi, I'm Hattie from Find Your True Voice, and you're listening to the Courageous Performer podcast, a podcast designed to transform the way you perform so you can feel comfortable and confident in front of any audience. And this episode is going to be all about the difference changing your thoughts can have on the way you perform and telling you how you can do that actually in the moment when you're in front of the audience, how you can actually change the way you think, even when those nerves hit. So my journey to this was I was a barrister, and then I developed postural tachycardia syndrome. So I gave up being a barrister because it wasn't possible for me to do that anymore. And then after a little while of getting to grips with my illness, I wanted to do something. I wanted a next phase in my life. So I retrained as a life coach. And when I retrained, I was also working doing some administration for Ames International Music School, which was a summer music school for singers. And so as I was doing my life coach training, I also had the chance to watch singers perform. And I wondered whether what I did as a life coach would help them perform better, let go of their fears, and really commit to the performance. So I started coaching singers and barristers, actually, because I also made an association that had I known what I knew, what I've learned now as a barrister, it would have transformed the way I performed as a barrister. So I coached singers and barristers and all sorts of different people. And it worked. It really did transform the way they performed. The next step was to see whether I could transform the way they performed when they were actually performing. And I did these live events where I did a little bit of this. And what I saw was it really did change the way they performed. When you changed what they were thinking, you could change the way someone performed. The next big step was when COVID hit and I went online, and I was thinking, will what I do work if I coach people online, literally as they're performing to a group? So I set up this free workshop and I invited people to come along on the premise that I'd never done this before and I didn't know if it worked. And even my singing teacher came along, which was utterly terrifying for me. He was like, is this going to work? And yes, it did work. By talking to them about their thoughts and talking about ideas to change the way they were thinking, in that moment, it changed the way they perform. Even with my singing teacher who came along and sang, and then we talked about what was going on for them, and they let go of a few things. And the next performance, the first performance had been amazing, but the second performance was a whole nother level because they had let go of some of the things that were holding them back. So my question for you is, what thoughts are holding you back? Because the first step in all of this is to identify what are the thoughts that are holding you back. Letting go of them is the next step. But the first one is to identify them. And we often avoid doing that for fear that they might become overwhelming. But I say have courage and identify them, because sometimes by merely identifying them, you can let them go. It's a miraculous thing and it's wonderful to watch. But I discovered this whole process worked. It worked live and in person. It worked online by talking to somebody about their thoughts about themselves, their material, and their audience. Really transforms how they perform because they can let go of some of their fears. Now, the next question was, can you do that in the moment? And yes, the answer is you can. You can develop techniques whereby if you feel your nerves taking over or if you feel you're off track in the moment, you can let go. For example, one of my techniques, and I do this when I go off kilter, is I focus outwards. I make eye contact with somebody in the audience, somebody out there. And I've noticed that for me, because of my thoughts, because of the thoughts I have about myself, and one of the big thoughts for everybody is that fear of judgment, because when you put yourself out there, you will be judged. You won't be judged like you judge you, but you will definitely be judged. And when I feel that fear of judgment and I start judging myself, my process is to focus outwards and make eye contact with somebody. And it transforms the way I perform. And I've done a huge amount of work on this. And I can do that absolutely in the moment as I notice it happening. So if you notice yourself going inward, maybe you can try focusing outwards as one of your techniques. But there are a whole load of different techniques that I teach, and it all depends on what the thoughts are you have in those moments where you find yourself tying yourself up in knots. So you can do the work before and during and after. You can go back and go, what went wrong there? And all of this is a beautiful learning curve. And so I now run these workshops regularly for my club. And every now and again, I do a live in-person workshop, probably about twice a year. One of them is a big workshop where I teach my Free Your Voice process, and I do that in the spring. And the other one happens in October, where I do it for my Courageous Club members. But I also have spaces for other people, some of whom have worked with me before, and others have never met me before. And so if you would like to come along to the one in October, I have some spaces that I set aside for people who've never worked with me before. And some for people who have worked with me before and would like to come along and work one-to-one with me for a day. It's a full day workshop, 9:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. It's in London, and you will get to work with me on your thoughts in the moment. I also bring in other experts to work with you on different aspects of your performance, but you will get to work with me one-to-one on what is going on in your head, the reason it's there, and how to let it go. In the moment, as you are performing, you can bring that to me and we will work on it, and we will transform the way you perform live and together. If that's of interest to you, it's happening on the 26th of October in London. And I have already sent out an email with the details to people on my list, but I will attach a link to the details with this podcast episode. Whether you're listening to it as a podcast or watching it as a YouTube video, there will be a link so you can find out a bit more about it. Because my passion is changing the way you think. Because I know that everybody can perform with comfort and confidence and excitement rather than fear. Have that wonderful nervous excitement rather than that horrible restricting fear. And all it takes is changing the thoughts that are in your head. And the thoughts that are in your head, it is totally possible to change. They are just neural pathways, and we can change them. So if you would like to change the thoughts in your head, you can come and work with me live in person. You can follow me and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube channel. Or if you'd like more support, email me and tell me your story, and let's work out a solution for you. You can email me at Hattie, Hattie, at findyourtruevoice.co.uk. That's Hattie, Hattie, at findyourtruevoice.co.uk. And as I say, tell me what's going on for you and we'll find a solution. I'm Hattie Volker from Find Your True Voice. Thank you so much. You've been listening to the Courageous Performer podcast. I look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.